My name is Doug. I too am an alcoholic. To be honest with you, I don't really have a problem with alcohol, except for when I drink. But I haven't found it necessary to do that since December the 3rd of 1990, my official birthday. My first date of alcohol-free reality was on December the 4th of 1990, and I haven't found it necessary to return to my primary addiction. However, I'd like y'all to know that just because Dougie stopped drinking that cheap vodka, I did not get struck wonderful. I had very, very little confidence in your silly program of recovery. Thank you very much. And thank God that there are a lot of pretty women in Alcoholics Anonymous, because that was reason enough to keep this boy coming back. I want you to observe how well dressed I am tonight. This is a far cry from 31 years ago. Now that you've seen it, I'm going to get comfortable. Yeah. It's wonderful to be in Williams tonight. We have the permission of the speaker tonight to record this excellent talk that's about to happen. And I'm the recording artist as well, so I started the recorder. I hope nobody objects. About the group picture, a year ago this summer was my first summer up here in Williams. I'm a seasonal kind of guy. I come up here specifically during the summer season, and we had a going away party for Dougie. It was all about Doug. As I headed back to the warmth of Lake Havasu City for the winter. And I think we managed to get a dozen people in that group photo. If you're comfortable with it, after my share, it would please me tremendously if you'd give me a minute to organize you into some semblance of a civilized looking group, and I'll take this picture. If you're not comfortable with it, that's okay too. I would like to say that the picture will not appear at the level of press, radio, and films or on the internet. However, if you would like your own personal copy of this historic group picture, I actually brought a pen and a pad of paper so you can give me either your smartphone number so I can text it to you, or you can give me an email address, or I can give you my contact information and I'll send it via Messenger on Facebook. So, I did a bunch of preparation. I'm going to try to do this differently than I normally do. I actually took the time to read Bill's story on the way up here this afternoon. It wasn't necessary for me to drive myself. Thank you, John and Martha, my excellent limo drivers. And I would like to compare myself to the co-founder, Bill Wilson. So I'm thinking the best way to do that is to read some stuff out of Bill's story and to let that speak to my story as well. Chapter 1, page 1. War fever ran high in the New England town to which we knew young officers from Plattsburgh were assigned, and we were flattered when the first citizens took us to their homes, making us feel heroic. Here was love, applause, war, moments sublime with intervals hilarious. I was part of life at last. That's how alcohol made me feel. It was an instant marriage. I took to it like a fish in water, and I got to drink for a long time without any consequences whatsoever. I suffer from a disease that's progressive, and I got to nurse that without too many problems for a couple of decades. But it did get steadily worse. I got my first taste of sobriety in my late 20s. I was 27 years old and living in a little town called Santa Cruz over on the Pacific Ocean. And I had a doctor at the time that I had to see on a regular basis because I was nursing a workman's comp claim. I feigned a back injury at work, and that gave me all the time I needed to drink. And I got busy. And in a short time, I was beginning to experience daily hangovers. I had to check in with this physician on a regular basis to keep the workman's comp claim going. And I don't know why, but it occurred to me that I was beginning to feel depressed. And I shared with this doctor that bit of information, and he explained to me that alcohol was a depressant. And do I drink quite a bit? And yeah, sometimes. And he suggested that I stop drinking and see if that straightened the problem out. I had respect for this doctor, and I thought, yeah, what the heck? And after a couple of significant attempts to stop, I decided to call Alcoholics Anonymous Central Office in Aptos, and they referred me to a woman that called me back. Her name was Alice, and she called me honey. And that was, I hadn't heard that word in many years, and I fell in love at that point. She told me about an upcoming alcothon that was going to take place over that Thanksgiving weekend, and I showed up and didn't hear a damn thing that whole weekend. But like I said, there were a lot of pretty girls there, so I kept coming back. I managed to put together 2.5 years of alcohol-free something or other. I went to a lot of meetings. I had a sponsor in name only. My first criteria for picking a sponsor was to find somebody that would listen to me. And I can't remember his name. It wasn't important. I was, so I went to lots of meetings. Back then, the only reason I stuck my nose in this book was so that I could memorize something significant and impress you with my spirituality and wisdom. We have a funny God. He uses everything, I think. I met the woman I would marry. I had to look a little harder to find a man in Alcoholics Anonymous that would co-sign my getting married at 9 months of sobriety, but eventually I found him. I still don't remember his name either. And at 9 months of sobriety, my sweet fiance and I drove up to Lake Tahoe to get hitched by the Reverend Love at the Lake Tahoe Wedding Chapel. And that was kind of terrifying. I had never been married before. Most of the relationships I had rarely lasted more than a weekend. And when the woman and I were married for 2 months, we discovered that we were 3 months pregnant, and that's when the noose began to tighten. I got a job as a janitorial supervisor, and which meant that I shampooed a lot of carpets and stripped and waxed a lot of floors, and every so often I got to supervise somebody. But I lasted on that job for 2 years, and then I feigned another slip and fall accident because I felt like I needed a little break. I went out on workman's comp again, and I didn't do much in the way of honesty during that 2.5 year period. My wife, on the other hand, was commuting from Santa Cruz to Sunnyvale, where she had a real job working in Silicon Valley, and that was like a 1 hour commute without traffic, and she was getting kind of weary of that. And so I agreed to move to Silicon Valley and I didn't have much of a resume, except that I really knew how to talk shit. So I got a job as a foot canvasser door knocker for a company that sold and installed central heating and air conditioning, and I was an overnight instant success. I had been an accomplished liar all my life, and now they were paying me for it. So I landed in that job for about a year, was a big fish in a small pond, and I enjoyed that status. And then I sort of figured out that, you know what, if I were to own the company, then I could probably go out and drink like a gentleman again. And so I started myself a little marketing group in Silicon Valley, selling a different type of home improvement. And in the heyday, I had 3 lead generators and 3 first call closers. And I was the guy in charge. There was 1 year that I had a 6-digit pre-tax income. It wasn't quite enough, so I managed to max out 4 platinum cards in the same year. I was the guy that just always needed a little bit more. That's pretty characteristic, I think, of people like us. I tested my theory after the wife and my firstborn son were in bed. I decided to have a few drinks, and it wasn't that bad the first time. And but you know, it set off this mental obsession. I got a problem that continues to center itself in my mind up here. That's what I wrestle with today at 31 years of sobriety. I still get it in my head that I can manage this thing. Every so often, the universe has to throw me a curve and bring me back down to earth. Generally that looks like smacking the guy in the head, and that recently happened to me again. On October 21st of this year, as I moved my 19-foot, 43-year-old travel trailer and home from the high country up here down to Lake Havasu City, I lost control of the vehicle and pissed off a whole lot of people on Interstate 40 for hours. My SUV and my travel trailer ended up on its side, and that's when I started doing one of them their spot check inventories, like what's wrong with this picture? Where did I go wrong? And over the course of the next 6 weeks, the universe threw a lot at me. It's been hard. The degree of surrender that I've experienced in the last month and a half has been simply profound. I had a minor injury in this accident. I got a broken blood vessel in my eye. But the folks in the ambulance thought that was good reason to take me to the emergency room in Kingman, given my age and other health conditions. And when I got to the emergency room, I called friends of mine that were also fellow nomads that were still up here closer to Williams, and they came to my rescue, and they drove 100 miles and got to the emergency room even before they had released me. I have a wealth of friends today. I have an amazing support group. But you know, I still wrestle with this pride and ego crap. It's amazing to me that I can go through something so incredibly cataclysmic as this last month and a half, and still, in real short order, the monster comes up again and climbs back in the driver's seat. But I'm here to tell you tonight that one of the benefits of achieving 31 years of sobriety, and God, I celebrated my 70th birthday here recently. Amazing, huh? Thank you. One of the benefits of those two facts is the recognition that, you know what, it just takes a hell of a lot of stamina in order to live in the problem. And I just don't have the stamina that I did at age 39. So surrender comes a little bit easier to this old guy. And I've had a lot of practice with the solution. But to be honest with you, still my biggest problem is remaining on my knees. So, my friends picked me up at the emergency room. So much for my plan, John. I was gonna really do this different. Are you impressed with all the nice little orange tabs on there? Look I got notes in the margin, and I highlighted it, and anyway, my friends picked me up in the emergency room in Kingman and brought me back to Welsh Road, which is about 10 miles west of here. The universe had an immediate upgrade for me. They presented me with the back half of a luxurious 32-foot Class A motorhome that I shared with a lady friend of mine. And this was far from Dougie's original plan. It was my plan to move that trailer down to Lake Havasu City and then check in here in Flagstaff for open heart surgery. That got put off for a week because of the injury to my eye. My heart surgeon was concerned that might be a problem because of the blood thinners they give you in advance of this procedure. So they played it safe and put it off for a week. A little more on that in a minute. I came back to my camper friends on Welsh Road, and over the course of the next 3 days, I set the intellect to work on the problem. It scared the hell out of me. It appeared that my only alternatives were to either, accept the generosity of my friends or retrieve my pup tent and pound some stakes in the ground. And, to be honest with you, that seemed like a reasonable alternative there for a minute. Otherwise I would have to accept your generosity and, not look so good for a minute. That's, when I got to Alcoholics Anonymous, I got to tell you that my new drug of choice became your love and approval. And I was willing to go to most any length in order to secure that. I was previously an accomplished liar as a practicing alcoholic, and as I look back on it today, in hindsight, I think that need for your love and approval only became more amplified in the absence of my medicine, cheap vodka. And I redoubled my efforts. My skills as a liar blossomed once I hit sobriety. To be honest with you, I think this is where my real problem started, was in the absence of my alcohol. I was desperate. The only thing I was really clear on as I entered Alcoholics Anonymous at age 39 was that I was really sick and tired of going to jail at the most inconvenient times. And in my last 2 years, I had been arrested 7 times. All but one of those arrests had to do with domestic violence. And the state of California was getting sick and tired of boys like me. So they passed a new law, and that law stated that if they could hold me, even if she didn't want to press charges. Now, prior to that time, she would get worried that Dougie wasn't going to be there to work, and she had, so she would insist, no, please let him go. And San Jose Police Department didn't do that this time. So I was charged with a felony, a violent felony, because I put hands on her. And they held me for 2 weeks. And I didn't, they didn't give me anything to drink. And it was miserable. And I really put the intellect to work on that problem. And over the course of 2 weeks, I figured out why my incarceration was the fault of the San Jose Police Department. And, but I did make one minor concession, and that was Dougie needs to learn how to drink differently. Anyway, I tried to start modifying my drinking over the course of the next few months. I thought, well, you just got to mix that vodka with fruit punch or something and dilute it a little bit. And I would just end up drinking more. Or, you know, you got to make sure that you got a little food in your belly before you drink. And I would just drink more. And one night, I resurrected the resentment machine. That's something that's necessary for people like me so we can justify this incredibly self-destructive drinking that we do. I've got to make it somebody's fault. And more often than not, that safe target was my wife. And I watched myself one more time make her the problem and justify that next tumbler of whatever it was. And I got it in my mind that she's misbehaving again. And I almost, for the third time, called the San Jose Police Department to get them out there to straighten her out. I did that not once, but I did that twice. They both times they showed up. Both times they encouraged me to come outside and talk with them. And the moment I hit the sidewalk, they arrested me for drunken public. Twice. I'm not a quick study, you know. Anyway, that's what my disease looks like, and but I don't know. I had a moment of clarity on that third time. This thing, I recognize that this thing was maybe going to get me in a little trouble here. And that's when it became apparent to me that I had lost the ability to control and enjoy my drinking. And that's when I knew that I had crossed that invisible line. On December the 3rd, I had my last drink. I experienced some chest pains, and my breathing was very labored. And I got a free ambulance ride to Valley Medical Center in San Jose. That's where you go if you got no medical insurance. And I got to meet this incredible bitch of a doctor. And she, I had to reconstruct the whole story because, to be honest with you, I don't really remember too much of it. But as I understand it, I had been in the hospital for several hours. They had me in these Velcro cuffs on the gurney, like I was a threat to somebody or myself. And they had run some tests on me when I was still 3 sheets to the wind. And this lady doctor comes to me and shows me these tests that they've done on my heart. And my heart beats very strongly like this, and then just kind of takes a little break. And that's apparent on the printout. And she got my attention. She said that my heart failure was a direct result of a compromised liver function. It's called congestive heart failure. And it's a direct result of when your liver's not keeping up with your intake of whatever, your body begins to get very bloated, including your heart muscle, and the walls of your heart get nice and thick and still beating strong. It just doesn't have any volume. And so she let me chew on that information for a little bit and came back a few hours later and said, we don't mind so much that you're trying to off yourself, but we really resent the fact that you're doing so at county expense. She hurt my feelings. She really didn't appreciate how sensitive I was. She let me think on that for a little bit. And the next morning, she said they had a bed for me across the street in Detox if I chose to do that. And I thought, well, maybe that's a good idea. I could use a little rest. And that's what I did. It would be 3 years later when I met this bitch in a meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous. Oh. She knew exactly what she was doing. And she's an incredible woman. We got some hard-ass AAers in San Jose. Anyway, I checked into Detox, and over the course of the first 3 days of my sobriety, I was preoccupied with the fact that, I finished that pack of cigarettes in like 3 hours, and I was out of cigarettes, and some generous 12-stepper left this pipe tobacco for us to smoke, and he also provided these papers that you're supposed to roll the shit up in, and this was not a skill set that Dougie had acquired yet. And so I was experiencing an extreme amount of frustration trying to figure out how to smoke this stuff that tasted like cow shit. And I became obsessed with the fact that I had nearly a full carton of my favorite brand at home with Mama. And this was not my first trip to Detox. I had a lot of priors of going to Detox and calling her and sweet talking her into coming and pick me up, and this time she wasn't going for it. I called her 3 days in a row, about 4 o'clock in the afternoon, collect, and pleaded with her to just, bring the cigarettes down. She said, nope. And on day 3, she said nope, and it made me furious. And when I slammed the phone, Tyler probably doesn't remember the day when we had pay phones on the wall, but I slammed that phone down so hard that it probably should have taken the damn thing off the wall. That's how pissed I was. I was beside myself. However, I still had $6 in change to my name, and back in 1990, with $6 in change on you, you can still get not only a pack of your favorite cigarettes, but a whole liter of Lucky vodka. And I came up with a plan. I'm a real alcoholic. I sensed that there was a flaw in that plan, and I was in a bit of a dilemma there. And I went to the guy that was working behind the desk at Detox, and I explained to him my dilemma, and he suggested that I might want to try something different, and he encouraged me to go back to my room and get on my knees and mumble the silly prayer. Well, that made absolutely no sense to me whatsoever, so I had to think about this for about an hour, and then I concluded that, well, what the hell, what do you have to lose? So I did as he suggested, and you know what, that night I slept like an absolute baby. I couldn't believe it. And the next morning when I woke up to a feeling that everything's going to be okay. It just amazed me. An hour later, one of my newfound friends in Detox, a man with an incredible amount of time, like 19 days, came to me with 3 packs of my favorite brand. And I was sure there was a God. That just blew me away. That got my attention. That's what needed to happen for me. The surrender didn't last very long. That's my problem. I still got this alcoholic ego that resurrects itself on a dime. Fortunately, our co-founder Bill decided it might be a good idea to include this 10th step, which also includes the word admitted, like we see in 2 other steps. In step 1, we admit that we're powerless over alcohol. In step 5, we share that admission with another person and with God. And in step 10, we continue to take personal inventory and admit when we're wrong. That's the step that saves my ass today. But I got to get into a little discomfort before I get into action. Action is a key word. The principles of my recovery include honesty, open-mindedness, and willingness. Really hard for somebody that's as self-reliant and above average intelligence as me. Intelligence is a serious liability for this guy. And I have to be reminded of that on a frequent basis, even at 31 years. I leaned into the reality of my situation down on Welch Road while cohabitating with Peggy in that 32-foot Class A with 2 sliders and absolute palace and flat screen. I was having a hard time sleeping because I had a lot to think about, and I tried to figure out. And after 3 days of that toxic fear, I surrendered and said, well, you know, maybe this would be a good opportunity to get the power involved in the equation. So one more time, like he's talking to the air, I asked God to help me. Felt a little better that night. Got some sleep. When I woke up the next morning, I was a little bit more open to the idea that maybe that force out there could come to my rescue again. And week later, me and some other friends moved from Welch Road down to Lake Havasu City. And I picked up my motorcycle that I had driven down there the week before. And so now I was independent. I had some transportation. And I started resuming my AA meetings in Lake Havasu City. They put surgery off for a week, but on December the 2nd, at 1:30 in the morning, the state of Arizona provided Dougie with a ride to Flagstaff Medical Center for surgery that took place at 8:30 in the morning on November the 3rd, excuse me. Quick recovery, huh? I think the universe was kind of enjoying watching this surrender that was taking place at long last in Dougie's life, and decided that we should stay in that same chapter for a little bit longer. So I went under anesthesia the morning of November 3rd, and this was a 5-hour operation where they harvest a vein from your leg, and once they open your chest, and put you on a bypass pump. They stop your heart. And then they take this vein and another one from the inside of someplace, and they create these little grafts and bypasses around the stuff that's all plugged up. And then they pull the sternum back together and use some incredible wire to hold it in place and tell you that for the next 3 weeks you have to sleep on your back. You have no idea how much I've taken for granted in my life, but I had a surgery 30 years ago to correct a problem in my lower back, and I haven't been able to sleep on my back ever since. They said, don't worry about it. We're going to give you some pain relief so you can stay on your back. I like pain relief. I've been a Dr. Feelgood for a long time. They give me some narcotics, and my body won't tolerate them. They give me all the anti-nausea medications, and apparently Dougie's been clean for a little too long, and my body has an instant reaction to this shit, and I just throw up. And for the next 2 weeks, I get to labor through sleeping on my back. I get 2 complications while I'm in the hospital. On 2 occasions, I'm looking forward to going home the next day. Then I develop a case called AFib, which is a fairly common side effect after a surgery like that. And what's going on down here is this heart's got a brand new blood supply, and one of those 4 chambers is supposed to be in charge of the whole band. But these other chambers are so excited to come back to life that they want to run the show, and none of those chambers can agree with each other. So they're all saying, yeah, we got new blood. And they're just pumping it nowhere. It's but they're excited. They're so excited they want to come right out of your damn chest. So after 4 days of that and taking this weird medication that also causes nausea and a lot of other incredibly bad feelings and massive shortness of breath, my heart surgeon comes to me and says, we got to do something about this. And they got another little procedure that where they put you under a general anesthesia again, and they give a shock to the heart muscle, a shock that's so intense that they got to put you under a general so you don't have to remember that for the rest of your life. And they were going to do it that morning, but Dougie had a giant breakfast that morning, and that got me off the hook. And later on that day, my body and my heart started to respond to this new medication, and the AFib went away. The next morning, the AFib was still gone, but I was beginning to experience a new breathing sensation. And they take blood out of your arm there about, I don't know, every 20 minutes. And they have some of the most creative reasons for preventing you from getting any sleep whatsoever. But one of these blood tests revealed that I had an extremely high white cell count. And I couldn't hardly breathe. And they did a chest x-ray that revealed the fact that, oh, you got a case of pneumonia. And additionally, there's some sort of infection in your lungs as well. They put me on some really heavy-duty industrial strength antibiotics. My body doesn't respond to them. And I'm starting to think, well, you know, maybe dying isn't that bad. I can't begin to describe the agony of this experience. The most terrifying moment of my life was they had me on the ventilator for 5 hours after surgery, and what they do is they turn off the anesthesia chemicals, and the first thing to come back to life is your brain. So I was conscious, but the rest of your body kind of comes back to life gradually, including your lungs. So they've removed this breathing tube from my throat, but my lungs don't have a clue what the hell to do. And I experience this incredibly terrifying feeling that I'm suffocating. And I'm thinking to myself, something must have really gone wrong. And this is what it feels like just before you die. And I don't know. Obviously, my lungs started working again. And but you know, just in that 5 or 10 seconds, I don't know, it felt like an eternity to me. I had an opportunity to review who I've been for the last couple of years in sobriety. And it occurred to me that I had made no arrangement for my children, and that I had a whole lot of unfinished business. It also occurred to me that the reason I had a whole lot of unfinished business is because, one more time, Dougie's all invested in Dougie. He's not thinking about anyone else. I have returned to that passage we read on page 62 describing selfishness and self-centeredness. And that resulted in yet another surrender. They finally figured out what bug was responsible for the infection in my lungs and got me on the right antibiotic. And the next morning, my white cell count had dropped dramatically. And one more time, they promised me I'd be headed home soon. I began to experience some gratitude. Came home to Lake Havasu City to my next miracle. Dougie got another living upgrade. My friends John and Martha over here invited me to stay in their incredible home with an in-ground pool. Definitely wasn't my plan. You know, I was going to hold up again in that 43-year-old travel trailer and tough it out. It's just amazing to me what happens when I get out of the driver's seat and surrender. It's been a long time since I've taken a hit like this. Taken a hit like this in order for me to get real, to get rigorously honest again. The first time that happened, like I said, I came back to Alcoholics Anonymous meetings, a lot of nice looking women here, and I knew Dougie needed something to feel better, and I met her at about 8 months of sobriety, and never mind the fact that Dougie's still married, has a wife and 3 children at home, I needed something. And my something was 6 foot tall and 8 years younger than me and drop dead gorgeous. And I was convinced that if she and I were in a relationship, then I could endure this miserable reality and maybe never have to drink again. The universe had other plans. I was still the same incredibly needy person that I was as I entered sobriety. As a result of benefit of step none, and I was still managing the whole goddamn thing, and I needed lots of reassurance on account I had a rather low opinion of myself, although I didn't think so. I told her all the same lies that I did with every other woman in my life. They were a little more believable because Dougie wasn't drinking now. And over the course of the next 2.5 years, she kicked me to the curb 3 times. I had lots of clever little manipulations that I utilized so I could get a rise out of her, make sure she still loved me. Any kind of rise, be it negative or positive. If I could get her to pay attention to me, then I could be momentarily satiated in the knowledge that she still cared. And I wore her out. The third time she kicked me to the curb, she meant business. And it was then that I moved into my 13-foot, 35-year-old travel trailer and parked it on a vacant lot next to a buddy's house in downtown San Jose, and proceeded to have a nervous breakdown. I was sleeping every other night. When I could sleep, I'd get an hour, maybe two, and I wasn't working, so I had a lot of time to think. And I'm here to tell you today that nervous breakdowns can be highly underrated forms of spiritual transformation. God, that was by far the most painful chapter in my life. She had definitely become my drug of choice. In that moment, I thought I was suffering from a broken heart. I would have to be in the rooms for another 10 years before I was able to say what it really was. What it really was, folks, was a case of untreated alcoholism. I had done nothing different. My opinion of myself was in the gutter. And in that profound pain, I found the necessary motivation to turn to this book. But I didn't get that inspiration until I was at the point where I was ready to put the gun in my mouth. It's amazing to me that drinking didn't seem to be an option, but suicide did. I remember hearing in the rooms that under circumstances like this, intensive work with another alcoholic might be a good idea. And I was beginning to sense that this is where my problem was. I was beginning to see that I was insane. And so, having that little bit of inspiration, I went to our local Alano club, met a kid by the name of Michael with 90 days of sobriety, and did the very best I could to be present for a conversation with him, ask him questions, shut up, listen. And that was incredibly hard for me. But I did notice that it gave me a little bit of break from the insanity that was going on between my ears, and I was appreciative of any kind of break from that reality. I did something else very uncharacteristic. I called this guy called Sponsor, keep you people off my back, and sought some advice. And he said, well, have you asked God to help you? No. He says, you might want to do that. So I turned this thing into an absolute mantra. Every time I think of it, I'm talking to the air saying, God, please help me, please help me, please help me. I'm still not sleeping. Still every other night. At this point, the brain chemistry is getting so loopy that I'm delusional. I am really terrifying. I was very much aware that I was losing my mind and could do nothing about it. Next visit with the sponsor, he says, well, do you know where the third step prayer is? No. Page 63. Well, you might want to read it a few times each day. I said, okay. And nothing changes. In fact, I think my pain got even greater. But my next conversation I had with my sponsor, he says, well, doing that's just a signal to the universe that you're willing to go to any lengths. And I said, oh, no instant fix? No. Take away my troubles? No, I didn't read the other part of that. It said, take away my troubles, that victory over them may bear witness to those I would help with thy power, thy love, and thy way of life. No, just, please, take away my troubles. That was that's all I read in that. he said, this is probably a good time for you to start a 4-step. Okay. In very short order, I put together a life story that's in excess of 82 pages. I was motivated. I was so done feeling this way. I did not do the 4th step out of the big book. I didn't get that 5th step promise until I was 25 years sober. There's a passage in chapter 5 after we do our 5th step that says we could be alone at perfect peace. That didn't happen to me until I shared a bit of information with a Catholic priest that was 11 years sober at a men's retreat in Southern California. First men's retreat I'd ever been on. Prior to that time, I had serious attitude about men's meetings and men's retreats, and my attitude was, well, you know, I drank with the women, I'll get sober with the women, thank you very much. But my sponsor at the time paid $180 so Dougie could go to this retreat. And that impressed the hell out of me, and I thought, well, okay, maybe there's something to it. That was a profound weekend for me. It was a very intensive step workshop. I had a chance to give up some information that I had never shared in an inventory before about my son and the way I had treated him. I floated out of there, and I got to experience that promise. I could be alone at perfect peace. But these, the damnedest thing about these promises is that you gotta be willing to do some shit you don't want to do. And most of the time, my selfish and self-centered choices have to take me to a place of profound pain before I'm willing to do that. Today I know clearly that all of my emotional pain is a direct result of my character defects. But I wouldn't even begin to recognize that until I was in my 6th year of sobriety. That's pretty good, huh, Nancy? Thank you. I'm sure I'm glad I closed this book. I'm starting to feel connected up here. I really appreciate y'all. In my 6th year, it was time for Dougie to confront his nicotine addiction, because that morning cough was like lasting until 5 or 6 o'clock in the evening, and now there was starting to be some blood in it, and I got to meet a woman that I'd gotten sober with. She was in the hospital with the last stages of emphysema, which is a really nasty way to go, and they can keep you alive for months in that condition where it feels like you're drowning, and it's an all-day struggle to get your next breath. And that was the same disease that killed my father. And I said, you know, I don't mind the idea so much of dying, but I sure as hell don't want to go that way. Brad, are you going to give me a 10-minute warning, or do I just... Okay. You're making me nervous here. I'm just getting warmed up. Just lock the goddamn doors, will you? I gave up cigarettes in my 6th year of sobriety, and I was 2 weeks without my last cigarette. I had my firstborn son for a visit that weekend, and Dougie was feeling better. Dougie was feeling everything much better, and I was easily pissed off, and my 16-year-old son seemed like a pretty safe target, and took me very little work to find something flawed about him that I immediately brought to his attention. And that was a horrible weekend. I took my son back home to his mother's on Monday, and less than a week later, my son disappeared. He'd been gone a week when San Jose Police Department labeled him a runaway. That did not sit well with me. I began to experience an incredible amount of anguish and guilt for the way that I had treated him, not only that weekend, but as a practicing alcoholic and 6 years of my sobriety. Went to my sponsor, had me do a brand new 4th step. Got to identify all the character defects that I hadn't talked about since that first 4th step at 3 years. We analyzed that information for the specific character defects that were involved. And then I got my first exposure to step 6. My sponsor had me do a written exercise that involved 2 different questions about each one of those character defects. There were 7 of them. He pointed me back at step 4 in our 12 and 12, where we got a list of the things called the 7 deadly sins. And I got to ask myself questions like, what did my anger make me do that I didn't want to do? What did my pride keep me from doing that I should have done? His instruction was to write a full page in response to each one of these 14 questions. And I'm here to tell you today that as I completed that exercise, something magical happened. I was able to recognize for the first time that if I kept doing what I was doing, I was going to keep feeling like a piece of junk. Once I could make that connection, it made good sense to me to start practicing some new behavior in step 7. And that began with paying child support. I was 6 years sober, had never paid a penny in child support, and I got to experience financial insecurity on a new level. You know, it wasn't like I didn't have the money. I always had the money. I just always needed a little more money. And every month I would watch my checking account drop as that check cleared. And I got to learn a new lesson about fear, which I frequently quote in meetings. One of the things we inventory in that step 4 are our fears. Page 68, we reviewed our fears. We put them on paper. We asked ourselves why we had them. Wasn't it because self-reliance had failed us? Well, also on page 68, at the bottom of page 68, there is a solution. And I apologize, I'm paraphrasing a little bit, but it runs something like, we ask God to remove the fear and to turn our thoughts to who we think this power would have us be. At once, we begin to outgrow fear. That doesn't mean it goes away. It means we begin to outgrow it. No instant fixes, boys and girls. This program of recovery requires work. And fortunately, I've been blessed with enough emotional pain in my life that I've been willing to work instead of drink. In that respect, it's a blessing. I got on the other side of that exercise. I began to change my mind about me. That was evident when I was in meetings. I need you people. You people are my mirror. You reflect what a good job or a poor job I've been doing recently by the way I judge you. And I began to observe in meetings that my need for your love and approval wasn't quite as bad as it was as when I entered sobriety. The miracle of a new opinion of me began to emerge. After a little bit of work, I still have to remind myself of that fact. I still have to make conscious and deliberate choices in that direction. It still is not second nature to me. 3 months after Jeremy's disappearance, his remains were discovered in a place called Santa Teresa County Park. It's about a 15-minute walk from where his mother lived. I didn't have to drink. I didn't pick up a cigarette. That's the miracle of this program. That's what happens when I'm willing to do the shit I don't want to do. Had a funeral for him, put him in the grave. I still hadn't cried. Went to my sponsor. He said, "It's really important that you cry." I said, you won't get any peace around this unless you can go there. He instructed me to buy a bouquet of helium balloons and to go to this hilltop in South San Jose, and with my magic marker I was to write those things that I most appreciated about my son and release those balloons one at a time. And took about 3 balloons before I got a little tear in my eye. By the time I was a balloon 10, I was crying violently. It was the most energized cry I've ever experienced in my life, the most profound surrender I had ever experienced in my life. Then something miraculous happened. I just got this incredible feeling of peace and tranquility. It just washed over me. And it was in that instant that I knew that God was doing for me what I couldn't do for myself. But it was a direct result of a serious commitment to set aside all that pride and ego and to just get real, get transparent. It's been 25 years since Jeremy died. His birthday's May 19th. I was 21 years sober when 15 years later, when I finally found the courage to visit his grave for the first time and to try to do something that looked like a 9th step. There was another surrender waiting for me there. As I sat and talked to the marker in his grave, a memory came flooding back to me. A memory of some violence I had inflicted on him. And it just ate my lunch again. I hung on to that information for an entire week. And after a great deal of misery and suffering, I picked up the phone, and the moment I dialed my sponsor's phone number, I felt better. I just had to take that little bit of piece of action and lean into the solution. The next time I dealt with that issue was at 25 years of sobriety at that men's retreat. And there was one last little piece of information that I hadn't shared with another human being. And it was about the look of terror in my son's eyes as I inflicted him with his due punishment. I shared that with that Catholic priest. And I finally got to experience that promise after the 5th step. I could be alone at perfect peace. What's more, I floated out of that weekend with an incredible amount of energy and peace, and I didn't screw it up for, I think, a whole week. It was, which is a long time for a guy like me. I am forever grateful for my AA family here in Williams and in Flagstaff, for my friends in Havasu. This is an amazing life, but doing the deal ain't for sissies. But the payoff is immeasurable. I am incredibly grateful. I've had some other significant losses since the death of my son, but again, the principles of recovery are still the same. My solution always begins with the truth, I got to be willing to put that crap aside and admit that, you know what, I don't like the way this feels. I got to be willing to let go of that eternal need to look good. Like, I got this. And that mother resurrects himself on a regular basis. Even after what I've been through with this heart surgery, I'm already seeing it again. You know, I got this large print big book a few weeks before my surgery, and on account of I was going to do the right thing while I was in the hospital and read the whole damn thing and emerge full of wisdom again. And, you know, I didn't even open this book until a few days ago. All in good time. I really appreciate you listening to me tonight. Thanks for being here. My name is Doug, and I too am an alcoholic.